Welcome to Powering the Future. In the past few years, Namibia has captured global attention in oil and gas exploration, with major players investing in our offshore potential. But oil and gas exploration is a long and uncertain process. Not every discovery leads to production. Today, we take a deep dive into how oil and gas exploration works, what makes discoveries commercially viable, and what recent industry developments mean for Namibia's future. Join us as we explore the risks, the rewards, and the realities of oil and gas exploration in Namibia. Today, we are taking a deep dive into this exciting new industry of oil and gas, an exciting development for Namibia. And today, in this conversation, I'm joined by the two beautiful, exciting experts from the industry ladies. I'm joined by Madam Selma Shimutwikeni. She's the founder and CEO of Reach Africa Consultancy. I'm joined by Madam Vicky Sibeya. She's the executive from NAMCOR, our national oil company. And with them, we'll go into the discussion to look into the intricacies of our new sector that is upcoming. But before we take a deep dive, good morning, Madam Shimutwikeni. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, how are you? How are you, Madam Sibeya?
Good morning, Mr. Ithindi.
Very good. It could be afternoon as well. So, no, thank you very much for joining me, and let's have this conversation so that we message to the public, the Namibian public, but we also message to our investor community, domestic, regional, and international. But maybe before we take this deep dive, let's just pause for a while and contemplate, imagine how it would look like in 4 to 5 years' time, Namibia as an oil and gas producing country. Just imagine that. It actually means that by then the socio-economic dynamics for the country would have changed for the better. The size of the country's economy, as measured by GDP, would have near doubled. The revenues that would come from the sector that would flow to state coffers would be significant, would be substantial. What does that mean for Namibia and our socio-economic context? It means that we have a capacity, the government has capacity, the country has capacity to address the socio-economic challenges more than ever before because of that capacity. We would have capacity to diversify the economy because that's an important aspect that you take away from an industry like oil and gas. So we diversify the economy so that we create additional and diversify the sources of growth, sources of job creation, sources of wealth creation. But we have also would have the capacity to address the social challenges much, much better than ever before because of that increased capacity to address needs in the social sectors such as education, skills development, and the outcomes thereof, to address outcomes in the health sector and to be able to provide better services, expanded services, and to look into other structural challenges like needs in the housing sector, for example. To look at the skills development because skills is one of the constraints in our economy. So these are the best prospects that we see coming is when the outcomes from this industry are realized. So I just posed that scenario for us really to have context that the direction of travel is pointing there, but we are not there yet. We are at the exploration stage. We are at the discovery stage, further exploration, further appraisals. So we need to unpack this to the rest of Namibia, but also to talk to our investor community to escort us to that journey. So let's get to it. I would like us to look at if we could just unpack, and I'm looking at Madam Sibeya, because you sit at a vantage position as upstream exploration executive at our national oil company. You have managed, you have seen, you have helped us also to look at how best the exploration processes could be undertaken to land us there. So let us unpack the oil and gas exploration process. What are the intricacies, so that an average Namibian understands this? So if Madam Sibeya, if I could start with you and we have this conversation, if you can just help us. So when we talk about oil and gas exploration phase, discoveries, dry and whatever wells, appraisal wells, field development. What are all these processes? What does it actually take? We are told that one well to drill is almost $100 million US. That's billions of Namibian dollars. Actually, in this sector, we talk about billions. Could you just unpack these things plus the billion buzzword associated with it?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ithindi. I think Namibia have done so well in terms of exploration activities in Namibia. I think to start with, the first phase of exploration is really data acquisition. So you need to acquire data, which we call in the industry seismic data, either 2D or 3D seismic data. This is really a mere image of the subsurface where we see the layers of the rocks, where the geoscientists really interpret to identify areas of possible accumulation of hydrocarbons using other technologies. So this type of process really would take a company around about 1 to 4 years to do, because seismic acquisition alone, really, and also processing of the data can take you up to 18 months. And thereafter interpret and identify an area where you can ultimately drill a well. So it's a lengthy process. Then after you have identified your prospect, then you drill a well. And I think, as I mentioned, these wells in Namibia, because we are a frontier region, it's really in the tune of 100 to 120 million. And considering that the easy oil has already been found worldwide, so we are looking in deep waters. So most of our wells recently are located in the deep water. That's why they are too costly. So in addition to that, once we have made a discovery, that's that indication that you have hydrocarbon presence. And these wells are really, in the terms of width, the largest part will be 18-inch. So you can just imagine a whole Namibian margin of 150,000 kilometers long, just a well of 18 inch. It really presents a very marginal in terms of depicting what you are seeing in the subsurface. So you need to require to drill more wells for you to understand the extension of the rock that is holding hydrocarbons underneath. So you need to, again, inject more money in order for you to understand the extension. And through drilling of appraisal wells, you also have to conduct what we call drill stem test. This is actually testing whether your oil or your gas can flow and at what rate. And that will give you an indication of the commerciality of that hydrocarbon discovery. And that is also coupled with determining the properties of that rock which is holding hydrocarbons. So a discovery, just an indication of that there's hydrocarbon presence. Then you have to wait for the results of appraisal for you to determine how much resource you have discovered, whether the rock properties can allow you to extract the hydrocarbon really at a very affordable cost to make your project economic. So this is what happened really in some of the recent licenses where we have made discoveries. And we drilled around about 9 wells to understand the extent of the reservoirs, as well as the properties of the reservoir rock, which is the rock that holds hydrocarbons. So that being said, some of the wells, when you drill, really, they'll give you indication of the rock having challenges. For example, I want to give an example of drilling water borehole, which is much easier and well understood in Namibia since we are a farming community. So even though water it's easy to find at a shallow depth, when you drill a well, you don't find a sea of water underneath. You drill, sometimes you find water, sometimes the water borehole is dry, sometimes the water that you find is not even good quality. That applies to oil and gas as well. So we use really sophisticated technologies. Just imagine in water depth of 300 meters deep, and you still have to drill another 400 meters deep. 4,000 meters deep for you to reach the reservoir. So just imagine the amount of technology and equipment that you have to use. So which means that industry standard benchmark in a region like ours, the chance of success of finding hydrocarbon is between 15 to 20%. So that means that if you drill 10 wells, at least 2 of the wells should be a discovery. And Namibia have done well since 2022. We drilled 15 appraisal and exploration wells, and we only have 2 dry wells. So it's a big success. It's indication and even encouragement for investors to come in. That's why you see companies, even though we have drilled some of the wells that are challenging, they still hope to get more accumulation of hydrocarbons in rocks that have really good properties. So as we have seen that we have a discovery which we call the Venus discovery, which we are developing already for us to produce in the next 5 to 7 years. So the current news on the Pearl 39 licenses where we are partnership with Shell and Qatar Energy, it was really something that is of industry standard, whereby you drill the wells, they have challenges, and you have to write them off. However, there are still wells that are still on the financial books of this company.
You're talking about big stuff here. The numbers that you have cited, they are mouth-watering, mind-boggling, actually. And we'll come to the Shell well, Pearl 39 type of thing in simplistic terms. But, you're talking about drilling for 4,000 meters. This is like
From
4
this
kilometers. And when I contemplate that and internalize it, when we used to walk to school and you walk for 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers to school, you are tired, you feel it's a long distance and so on. I'm just laying that to bear to have an understanding of what it takes actually to drill a well of that depth and the cost that is associated with it, so that we also just tie it to the 100 million, 120 million US dollars we are talking about, that it takes really to put up that capital and to drill. But you talked about also 250 kilometers or 300 kilometers offshore. Madam Sibeya, when you first took a helicopter ride to the field, how did it feel like? Tell me, was it not scary? I still have to do that, I must admit. Yeah?
So I think to do that industry, you have to go through a course that we call offshore survival. So
Right.
you should have survival tactics that you learned through the credited
Madam
training
Shimutwikeni, you hear that? Survival tactics. You must get there. We must get gears of survival tactics.
So
Yeah?
you have to be certified and you have to go through a thorough medical check. So you should be healthy fit. Otherwise, you won't be allowed to board that helicopter. So that helicopter, when it takes off, you will still be really flying over land for 30 minutes or so. And it can take you, depending where the rig is, up to 3 hours. And imagine offshore, when you are flying above the water, there's also fog. So your heart only really rests when you reach the rig.
Okay, very good.
So
thank you very much. I want to switch in the direction of Ms. Shimutwikeni. Ms. Sibeya talked about the quality and the work that is required in the drilling process, and the nature of the geology there too. So I want us to get in the discussion to enlighten us in terms of what it takes actually to get to a commercial viability of a well. given all these factors that Ms. Sibeya talked about, the distance is out there, how deep you have to drill to get to the reservoir. Sometimes it's a dry well, sometimes not. Sometimes you have a discovery. Now, if you have a discovery in that type of geological setup, what does it take for a discovery to be commercially viable? What are the factors that ideally an investor would look at to say that yes, this is a commercial viable discovery? What are the aspects that entities would look at to get to that pronouncement?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Ithindi, for that important question. I think there are a number of factors to determine commercial viability, and Madam Vicky spoke around the geological aspect. But investors look at different factors when looking at their, kind of like the investment destination. In this case, of course, Namibia.
Right.
They look at, obviously, to make sure we have attractive fiscal regime. They look at that we have stability, from political stability to regulatory stability. I think one of the key things we need to take note is that this sector requires collaboration. Collaboration between the public and private sector. In this case, we have NAMCO representing the interests of Namibia, and then, and of course, the IOCs. So when they're looking at commercial viability, it's a lot of moving factors. So, for example, if there's a discovery and there's more gas, natural gas, than oil, and this can be anywhere in the world. One of the key considerations is how do we get that gas? So that speaks to we will need infrastructure to get that gas. If a country doesn't have the infrastructure, then there's also question marks around commercial viability. Right. Doesn't mean there's no gas. It just means that we need supporting infrastructure to extract that. Also, I think just to add to what Vicky said, I think every well drilled, they're all different. So every company has their own different parameters of what they are looking at. And it's important to note that many of these international oil companies, they also have other operations elsewhere in the world.
Right.
So sometimes commercial viability is saying, okay, maybe it's better for us to focus on country B than country C because of different factors.
Right.
But it doesn't mean there's no resource. It's just, the different elements have to be in place to make sure that they're able to extract the investment that they're putting in.
Right. Okay, very good. No, thanks for bringing those dimensions. And I want to go back to Madam Sibeya, back to the issue of oil to gas ratio content issues, and the matters related to viability. That's one maybe that we can talk to. The other aspect, then we can take a deep dive into what Shell has pronounced earlier this year in terms of writing off that discovery, so that we just unpack this and actually contextualize, as Ms. Shimutwikeni has indicated, so that this is also better understood by an average Namibian. What does it mean? Is it end of life in terms of the exciting news of discoveries, or what is the bigger picture? Or is it the only discovery, or do we have other discoveries that may be commercially viable? If you could just touch on those aspects, maybe first talk a little bit about oil to gas ratio issues in our reservoirs there that we have studied so far, and then to talk about the Shell pronouncement aspect and the way forward issues and what we are doing. If you could delve into that.
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of oil to gas ratio, really this is just an indication that when you make a discovery, it's industry standard, and you normally find that always when you make an oil discovery, it will come with a portion of gas with it. So that ratio just measures how much oil is part of that hydrocarbon discovery and how much gas is it. So you find that in other instances, you will find when you have low oil to gas ratio, it means that you have more oil liquids in that discovery than gas. And when it's high, it's vice versa. So in NAMCO, we do conduct our studies. We usually already have indication of this oil to gas ratio when you do what we call the basin modeling studies for you to determine the maturity of the source rock, which is the rock that produces hydrocarbons. So in your mapping, you always see that there are portions where you see that there will be indication that this side of the basin, it will be more gas. So for example, in the Orange Basin, when you move to the east, as you might have known that in 1974 we discovered the Kudu gas field. That is purely dry gas. And as you are moving inwards to the west, the blocks in the middle are really perceived, according to our studies, they are in a range where you have a high gas ratio compared to oil. And as you move to the west, then you find more oil than gas. So that also depends on the type of source rock or the type of materials that were matured to produce that hydrocarbon resource. So you find that there are classes that we have in our industry, certain class that will be able to produce more oil than gas, which is what we call the materials that are cooked to be able to produce these hydrocarbons. So in our discoveries since 1974 so far, we have 4 major discoveries. The first one being the Kudu discovery, where we have really dry gas, very sweet gas, which we call sweet gas in the industry. And some of the mid blocks where we do have discoveries on Mopan and other recent discoveries, you find that there's a high oil to gas ratio, so the gas is high. And then you also find other discoveries like the one of Venus, where you really do have a good oil to gas ratio. There's a lot of oil liquids which can be produced. I think that's why you see that the countries have to prepare themselves to have strategies on how they utilize the additional gas which the companies have discovered if they were looking for oil. If they don't see oil, if their ultimate resource that they want to produce, what will the country do with that gas? So otherwise, it's really a norm. It happens everywhere. When you discover oil, there will be gas with that oil.
So can that gas, the sweet gas, be sweeter to national development? How can we leverage it?
Yes, I think the Kudu gas so far is very dry in such a way that it will require minimum processing for us to be able to produce electricity as we're intending to do. So if you do have wet gas, which means that you have to remove the condensate from the gas, it requires more processing. So what we have now in terms of Kudu, it really gives us a minimal requirement for us to process it to be able to produce electricity.
Right. Okay,
so that's
great.
what it means.
Okay,
that
great.
is sweet
So,
gas.
Madam Shimutwikeni, now so we have oil discoveries with associated gas. So we have these double whammy benefits potentially out there. Now, if you work a lot, Reach Africa Consultancy, you interact with the investor community. Sometimes you also listen to their passionate concerns and the voices from the field. Those are the aspects, for example, that the government, the ministry in particular, that we want to look at, so that in the policies, in the regulations, we are able to incorporate and take into the account those voices from the field. When you listen to the investors, current or potential, as regards the policy environment, as regards the incentives, as regards maybe some of the regulatory aspects, what are those regulatory or policy aspects that we need to look at, or that investors would emphasize are important for Namibia to develop this industry?
Oh, that's a very important question, Mr. Ithindi. I think on the positive side of things,
Yeah.
the fact that we are able as a country to attract leading international oil companies in Namibia is because we have an attractive policy environment in addition to our geology,
Right.
as well as the fiscal terms.
Right.
If they were not attractive, they would not come. They have many other
Okay.
options.
Good.
I think one of the key, I won't even call it an issue. I think it's just awareness that needs to be had among Namibians is that it takes time. And we started, Vicky, when was the Kudu gas discovered?
1974.
1974.
Older than yourself.
Yes, before I was born.
Let's not go into this age thing.
Before
Okay.
I was born. So I think one of the most important thing is just understanding that it is a process. I was actually doing a bit of research before our conversation.
Good.
And, you have countries like Angola. If you look at the time between exploration and production, it's around 12 to 15 years. Countries like Brazil, it's even, I think, around 30 years between exploration and production. So we need to understand that it is a journey, and different things are required at different stages of the journey. I think one of the key issues that gets raised is around this issue of local content, especially with our policy. And just understanding that, at the exploration phase, local content looks very different than at development, than it looks than at production. So we have to grow with the industry. I think from the investors' point of view, they're actually quite impressed with Namibia in regards of us having foresight to start preparations for the industry from the 90s. So especially in the space of capacity building and education.
Right.
We have many geologists, and I think through institutions like the Petro Fund, many of our young people are going to study. And then also many of the service companies supporting the industry, they have also taken on many young Namibians to train. So I wouldn't call it challenges. I think it's just a matter of managing expectations. And also, it's not only internal, there's also external factors that can also affect our environment. So whatever's happening geopolitically, or in terms of the economy, global economy. But I think it's about process and understanding at which phase we activate what to get to first oil.
Good. No, thank you. I'm glad that you talked about also the time duration issues, because an average Namibian out there, the news is out that we have discovered oil. Actually, different discoveries, different players, different discoveries. But the question is then, people are expecting, when will that oil flow? And I'm glad that we touched on the processes, the intricacies of those aspects, from discovery to appraisal to studying and to field development, and then the infrastructure that you require. I think that conversation also brought out the intricacies of saying we are talking about offshore discoveries, 250 kilometers, 300 kilometers away, and you have to go deep. Madam Sibeya said you have to go a water depth of probably a kilometer to 2, and then you go 3 kilometers deeper or more. So the whole infrastructure outlay, tells you the size of the investment, and therefore commercial viability takes into account the economics of that, the cost of that. What you are able to extract should be able to finance all that infrastructure outlay. And I think that's an important aspect also when Madame Sibeya talked about the case of Shell and the decision to write off for those particular sites, but not to write off the whole program entirely. Maybe as we move towards conclusion, Madam Sibeya, I want to draw your attention to the value chain and enabling infrastructure issues, because those are critical components, critical networks for a functioning industry. where you sit, and from NANCOR's experience and the benchmarking that you have also been able to do, and the experience of other jurisdictions, talk about even our neighbor, our northern neighbor, Angola, that has been in the game for quite a while. So we have learned that enabling infrastructure, port infrastructure, oil-based type of infrastructure, quite key to a functioning industry. Could you just talk to that? So, what is the thinking in the industry, and how best we could support that thinking to enable the develop for government to enable the conducive infrastructure for the industry?
Okay, thank you very much. I think, as Selma have mentioned, infrastructure is quite key in terms of developing our hydrocarbons. However, I should mention that the recent discoveries, which was done in petroleum licenses 39 and 56, deep in the ocean. At that end, really, it's also challenging to construct a pipeline. Hence, you look at production being done on a floating production platform. So, however, there are discoveries that we have made as well. In PEL 83, we have discoveries of kudu. And if you really also want to develop your gas, then we have to have an infrastructure that is coming really to onshore. So that can be really done really as a joint project. That's why a country needs what we call a gas monetization plan. What does the country have to plan is how do you want to use this additional gas that came with the oil discoveries, and also tapping into realizing the kudu discovery so that we can also benefit from that project as well. So that plan have to be on table and they have to be done as soon as possible. And I think it's just as Selma have mentioned, we need a collaboration with the international oil companies that are actually operating in these areas. And in addition to that, government needs to make sure that we do have clear laws, because our laws currently are not clear on those type of developments. How would we jointly do it with the other companies that are operating those blocks? So in addition to that, we do have a big energy deficit in our country. And I think this is one of the solutions that we can actually use to be able to solve those problems. I know that we are really exporting around about 70% of electricity from South Africa and other neighboring countries. So it's high time that if we fast track our gas monetization plan, we will be able to really bring on board one solution that can address the entire country electricity problem which we have at the moment, and be able also to support our neighboring countries, which are also landlocked in South Africa, which is also struggling really with load shedding. So I think just to sum up, we need a collaboration that is driven by government to decide how we develop this gas and what type of infrastructure that we will be able to require in order for us to do this development really adequately. I think we have to look also at the production cost, because when you put an infrastructure in place, it also plays a role on the production cost, which is very key on the economics of the projects which we have offshore.
So you are an investor. You represent. So 8 to 5. You are NAMCOR. So you are. You. It's like you are getting into the space. You are talking to government that we must mind the production costs so that NAMCOR operations in the sector are viable. Now, thank you very much, Madam Shimutwikeni. Let's close up. Let's move towards conclusion now. Reach Africa Consultancy helps us to put together and to organize the networking platforms. The National Energy Conference, Namibia International Energy Conference, is coming up in April.
Yes.
This is an annual event. It takes a lot of participation, and of course, from where I stand, from the ministry point of view, we are highly appreciative of that platform, because really you have players coming in, potential investors, but also the local voice coming through, so that we listen to both expectations and to be able to cascade that into policy that Madam Sibeya has talked about. Could you just, in summary, so what is upcoming apart from the International Energy Conference? You
Yes.
keep on rebranding that.
Yes.
So what is upcoming? What are the prospects looking like from your lenses? What are the upcoming projects? What are the the upcoming type of thing? How's the tempo? How's the pulse looking like from the investor point of view?
I think from the investor point of view, there's a lot of excitement and interest in Namibia.
Right.
This in April, the theme is leading the way towards becoming an energy hub. Kind of what are the building blocks for Namibia to become an energy hub? And I think in our conversation we have touched on those building blocks. I think what we are seeing more initially, I mean, the conference started in 2012, before there were all these discoveries. But the conversation has obviously evolved, and there's been so many developments. What we're seeing is a lot of now service companies. Besides the international oil companies, you have the service companies also coming to Namibia. And also, I think it's also important for people to note that, there's a lot of backward and forward linkages, from transportation services, our hospitality in terms of tourism. There's already services, businesses benefiting from the current discoveries. And I think as the sector evolves, there'll be more services required. I mean, just for example, a company reached out, wanted to come to Namibia, and their focus specialization is AI in health safety and environment.
Great. Exciting.
So that's interesting.
Yeah,
so from a technology point of view, Namibia is definitely trending globally. And we are, I think from an oil and gas perspective, Vicky can confirm that we are in the news almost every other week, especially internationally.
Okay.
So the interest is definitely very high. And then also, there's also great spin-offs because many people are discovering Namibia. So besides the oil and gas industry, they are very impressed by our infrastructure. Obviously, our tourism sector it's great. And so it's really bringing a lot of income into the country. So yeah, from the investor point of view, Mr. Ithindi, there's a lot of excitement. They want to know, obviously, when is first oil, and they are all positioning themselves to contribute and add value.
Okay, great. Now, this is good conversation, but I mean, every good thing comes to an end. I think we should, in terms of time, we should bring our conversation to an end. But you realize that we crave for this opportunity. I trust we will have another opportunity so that we can expound more on these topics and also look at another phase. Of course, as in an intertemporal sense, one would contemplate one stage we'll be talking about production issues, the real issues. But we have explored and I think laid bare the aspects of those stages that precede production. I think a lot, Madam Sibeya, you talked about the policy aspects and the legislation, and Madam Selma, you have also referred to that. And it's also just from my perspective to say that, yes, indeed, from the ministry perspective, we are hard at work to ensure that the legislation, which we have been preoccupied with, admittedly, for quite some time, is done, that you have the legislative amendments that are required that would promote not only upstream but also midstream and downstream issues, so that we look at the industry and value chain approach, and so that we address also uncertainties that might be there. One aspect that I want to mention in that regard is to say that I think one credit that we have and reputation that we have as a country is that we take a consultative approach to policy making, to legislation, and there is no change with from the ministry point of view and government point of view, that any legislative change, whether it has to do with local participation in the industry, local content and ownership issues, those aspects would be through consultative process, collaborative process with industry input, because it takes two partnership actually to make this industry work, given the complexities of it. You noted towards the end of last year, our cabinet has given a principal approval for the local content policy, and we are rolling that out and taking it to stakeholder conversation. We will be crisscrossing the length and breadth of the Republic to get the views of the Namibians, so that we finalize that policy, and then it will then be combed through into legislation that is appropriate for that. The other aspect of gas, we agree, it's a resource, we must leverage it. All of the sudden, with now these more discoveries of gas, we now have the volumes that makes actually gas to power a viable project. Before, we were used to talk about Kudu gas and whether it's a viable project to do so, but the players in the industry now say that they see more prospects for the viability of that project, and indeed, yes, it will help us to plug the energy gap nationally, but also for exports. So really, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for your input. Thank you to our viewers out there, Namibians and international listeners. Namibia means business. The Ministry of Mines and Energy is there really just to facilitate, and we are open to input, to views out there, so that this industry is made a reality in a manner that is commercially viable, taking into account the business imperative, the commercial imperative, as an anchor in the policy that government will put out, and the local participation, the greater local participation. Thank you so much for the conversation, Madam Shimutwikeni. Thank you very much, Madam Sibeya, for this important conversation. So I look forward to engaging again. Yeah, thank you so much.